Welcome back to the Noncommissioned Rascals channel, where we are your unofficial sponsors. Today we're here at the Pearl Harbor Aviation Museum to give you guys a tour. Make sure you follow along until the end because we will be doing our first ever free giveaway. So we're gonna get started. Alright, so they do have buses that shuttle people back and forth from the Aviation Museum and also the Missouri.
So they do have a 12-minute presentation here.
An aircraft carrier in the Imperial Japanese Navy, Kaga acted as a mobile air base for 75 aircraft represented by the miniature planes on the flight deck. When close enough to Pearl Harbor, aircraft would launch from the front third of the flight deck, conduct their part of the attack, and then land on the rear third. Aircraft would then be stored for the 4,000-mile trip back to Japan. Attacking Pearl Harbor was tremendously risky for Japan. You are standing on America's first aviation battlefield. On December 7, 1941, the Imperial Japanese Navy launched a surprise attack on the United States, bringing the U.S. into World War II the following day. The painting in front of you depicts the final moments of peace between the United States and Imperial Japan. In the center of the painting is Naval Air Station Ford Island. Just to the right of the airfield is a dark cylindrical water tower under construction that would soon be completed as the orange and white control tower you see outside of Hangar 37 today. At the top right of Ford Island are the battleships of the United States Pacific Fleet. This area is known as Battleship Row. Hangar 6, located at the very bottom of the painting, is where the very first bomb to hit a target at Pearl Harbor was dropped on Ford Island. Shortly before the first bombs dropped, the code word Tora, Tora, Tora was transmitted back to the Japanese fleet, signaling they had achieved complete surprise. The aircraft at the top left corner of this painting is an Imperial Japanese Aichi D-3A1 Val dive bomber, one of 3 types of aircraft used during the attack. Dive bombers were built to release bombs at a steep downward angle, which greatly increased their accuracy. The Val pictured here was piloted by Lieutenant Commander Takahashi, who dropped the first bomb on Ford Island at 7:55 a.m., destroying several aircraft around Hangar 6, located at the bottom right corner of the island. In front of you, and tipped with a green nose, is a Type 99 armor-piercing bomb. Converted from 16-inch naval artillery shells, these bombs could penetrate the heavily armored decks of the U.S. battleships. The small surface area of the point of the nose, combined with kinetic energy from the drop, allowed these bombs to penetrate multiple decks. The delayed fuse prevented the weapon from detonating on impact. Once deep inside the ship's hull, it would explode, causing maximum damage. Type 91 torpedoes were carried by Nakajima B5N Kate bombers. The black nose at the front is the warhead, which contains 452 pounds of explosives. At the back, you will see the torpedo's propellers, surrounded by large wooden fins. These fins kept the torpedo from turning side to side after being released from the aircraft and protected the propellers from being damaged upon impact with the water. Just ahead of the propellers are 2 smaller wooden fins. These fins prevented the torpedo from rolling after being dropped from the aircraft. The fins were a last-minute modification to the Type 91. But an essential part of the weapon's success at Pearl Harbor. The Nakajima B5N, codenamed Kate by American pilots, was a carrier-based torpedo bomber. The Kate didn't enter a steep dive as the dive bomber would, but rather it dropped its munitions while flying horizontally, either close to the surface of the water with a torpedo or at high altitudes with a bomb. You'll notice one of the wings is folded upward, This is not damage, but a design feature of carrier aircraft to save space on the ship's deck. The Kates carried weapons powerful enough to pierce the thick armor of their key targets, Allied warships. It was a Kate carrying an armor-piercing bomb that was responsible for destroying the battleship USS Arizona. Crewed by three, a pilot, a bombardier, and a radio operator, the Kate could carry approximately 2,000 pounds of bombs or a torpedo. Similar to other Japanese aircraft, the Kate lacked protective armor, a weakness that made her vulnerable to attack. Unlike the Zero, however, Kates lacked maneuverability until they released their bombs and lightened their load. Our Kate was discovered in the South Pacific well after the end of World War II. It is one of two surviving aircraft of its kind on display in the world, and the most intact of the two. At the end of the war, it was surrendered to Allied forces in New Guinea. Having no need for the aircraft, it was abandoned on the side of the runway where it last landed and was overtaken by the jungle. The damage you see on the aircraft was mostly inflicted after the war by nature and souvenir hunters. Above you is a full-scale replica of a P-40 Warhawk built for the 2001 film Pearl Harbor, which was filmed in part here on the museum grounds. As the U.S. Army Air Force's primary fighter on Oahu in 1941, the P-40's primary role in combat was to shoot down enemy airplanes. The wings of the P-40 house 6 .50 caliber machine guns, and the airframe is built for strength. Unlike the Zero, the P-40 offers protection for the pilot, with armored metal plates surrounding the cockpit and self-sealing fuel tanks. This map shows the scale of the Imperial Japanese attack on Oahu on Sunday, December 7, 1941. 353 Japanese planes attacked targets across the island in 2 waves. The first wave, shown in red, attacked at 7:55 a.m. with 186 aircraft, and the second wave, in gray, an hour later with 167 aircraft. The tan line represents a flight of American bombers scheduled to arrive on Oahu that morning, only minutes after the attack began. Notice that most of the airfields on the island were attacked by both waves. This was to ensure the destruction of American aircraft before they could launch and search for the Japanese fleet. The Japanese flag in the top right corner shows the position of the Japanese fleet, or Kido Butai, about 230 miles north of Oahu. In the bottom right corner of the map, you'll find the composition of the Kido Butai that sailed over 4,000 miles to neutralize American naval power in the Pacific. The Japanese goal was to eliminate the threat of American naval and air power for at least 6 months, giving their military time to secure territory and natural resources throughout Asia and the Pacific. Japanese leaders understood they needed to win a war against the United States quickly. The longer the war, the more likely their strategy would fail. Surprise was achieved not just because of careful Japanese planning, but also because of some mistakes made by the United States. One mistake occurred at the Opana radar station, which is marked at the northernmost point on Oahu. This radar station detected the Japanese planes 1 hour before the attack began. However, the officer in charge determined the radar returns were a flight of American B-17 bombers scheduled to land later that morning, and as a result, no action was taken. 2 American pilots who were able to take off in P-40s and fight back were Lieutenant George Welch and Lieutenant Ken Taylor. This leather flight jacket belonged to Lieutenant George Welch. Stationed at Wheeler Army Airfield in central Oahu, Taylor and Welch spent Saturday evening before the attack at the Officers Club, and played cards late into the night. Just before 8 a.m., the Japanese planes attacked Wheeler Field, destroying nearly all the P-40s parked on the ramp. Taylor and Welch, awakened by the gunfire and explosions, remembered the P-40s at Haleiwa Field on the North Shore. Still wearing parts of their tuxedos from the night before, Taylor and Welch dodged strafing Zeros as they raced to Haleiwa Field in Taylor's new Buick. The small field was untouched, and the two lieutenants jumped into two undamaged aircraft. Both Taylor and Welch took off during the first wave and shot down 4 attacking aircraft. They then landed at Wheeler Field to refuel and rearm. A senior officer ordered them to stay on the ground to not risk the few remaining P-40s. When the second wave attacked, they disregarded the order and took to the skies, shooting down 2 more aircraft. Taylor and Welch accounted for 6 of the 29 Japanese aircraft shot down that morning. For their efforts, both men received the Distinguished Service Cross, the second highest award in the U.S. Army. The twin-engine B-25 Mitchell medium bomber was capable of completing various types of missions, including level bombing, strafing, anti-submarine patrol, and photo reconnaissance. The aircraft's versatility made it useful in every theater of World War II. However, it is best known for its daring actions during the Doolittle Raid. This particular aircraft is a combination of several airframes pieced together to make a fully functioning B-25. Prior to arriving at the museum, it participated in the filming of the 1970 movie Catch-22. After arriving at the museum, the aircraft was restored to resemble the ruptured duck, plane number 7, that took part in the Doolittle Raid, which was commanded by Lieutenant Ted Lawson. You can see the nose art under the pilot's window on the left side of the aircraft. On closer inspection of the nose gear, you can see 2 signatures. These signatures belong to 2 Doolittle Raiders that visited our museum: Dick Cole, the co-pilot for Doolittle's plane number 1, and Tom Griffin, the navigator for plane number 9. This is a model of USS Hornet configured as it was in April 1942. The 16 B-25s on the flight deck are ready to embark on an incredibly risky mission called the Tokyo Raid, better known to history as the Doolittle Raid. Army B-25s were designed to operate from land-based airfields and were too heavy to regularly operate from the flight deck of an aircraft carrier. In fact, the concept of Army bombers on a Navy aircraft carrier was quite absurd. By 1942, the world had been at war for 3 years, and the Axis powers had conquered vast territories in Asia, Europe, and Africa. After the devastating loss at Pearl Harbor, the United States needed to strike back and bring the war to Japan. The vast distances of the Pacific ruled out a land-based air attack, but if a Navy carrier outfitted with Army bombers could get within range of Tokyo, they could launch, strike back, and land in friendly airfields in China. There were many challenges to this unprecedented plan, the largest being the amount of space a B-25 needed to take off, which was twice as long as the deck of the Hornet. 16 B-25s were heavily modified to reduce weight and increase fuel capacity, then lifted onto the deck of the Hornet by crane. The normal payload of a B-25 was 6 500-pound bombs at a total weight of 3,000 pounds. Doolittle's Raiders carried only 4 500-pound bombs each to reduce weight. Another weight-saving measure was to remove a majority of the guns and ammunition from the planes. Only the turret at the top of the aircraft would have had machine guns. To give the appearance of being fully armed, a tail gunner's position was added, and broomsticks were painted black and placed in the unarmed position. You can see an example of this at the back of our B-25. In April of 1942, just 4 months after the attack. The centerpiece of our Pearl Harbor exhibits is this portion of the battleship USS Arizona, which was moored along Battleship Row. This particular section was part of the ship's galley, or kitchen. On December 7, 1941, 49 Nakajima Kate bombers, each armed with a single armor-piercing bomb, attacked Battleship Row from an altitude of 10,000 feet. Of the 4 bombs that hit USS Arizona, the first 3 caused minimal damage. The 4th and final bomb pierced through 5 decks and landed in the ammunition storage bunker, igniting over 1 million pounds of gunpowder and ammunition. This secondary explosion lifted the 30,000-ton warship out of the water, broke the hull, and sank the ship in the shallow harbor where it burned for days. This devastating hit killed 1,177 of the ship's total 1,500 sailors, causing the largest loss of life that day. Thousands of gallons of oil leaked into the harbor, staining the side of the ship. When the oil ignited, the temperatures were high enough to melt the paint off the hull. As you walk around the display, you can still see streaks of melted paint towards the top of the piece and the thick black line of oil that surrounded the ship. USS Arizona took over 2 years to build, and when launched in 1915, it was the pride of the U.S. Navy. 26 years later, this mighty battleship was destroyed by an armor-piercing bomb dropped from an airplane. With the battleship fleet largely out of action, the U.S. Pacific Fleet had to navigate the road ahead with strategic air power. The age of the battleship was quickly coming to an end. Island uninhabited, Japanese leadership ordered pilots that were unable to return to their carrier to land on Niihau's large, dry lakebed and wait for a submarine to retrieve them. However, the occupants of the island had dug thousands of miles of trenches in the lakebed to prevent its use as a landing area. Naval Airman First Class Shigenori Nishikaichi was flying in the second attack wave when his Zero was damaged by ground fire and began losing fuel. Knowing he could not return to his aircraft carrier, the Hiryu, he attempted to land on Niihau, where his plane was further damaged by the trenches. With no electronic communications, residents of Niihau were unaware of the attack. They pulled the unconscious Nishikaichi from the wreckage, secured his pistol for safekeeping, nursed him back to consciousness, and that evening hosted a luau to show their aloha spirit. After learning of the attack, he was placed under house arrest, and a Japanese-speaking resident of Niihau, Mr. Harada, acted as a translator. Many details are still unknown, but somehow Nishikaichi enlisted Harada to help him escape. Together, they searched the village and eventually found his pistol and a shotgun with cartridges. Now armed, they went to his downed Zero to send a radio message. Unsuccessful in this task, Nishikaichi decided to set the plane on fire to keep its secrets out of U.S. hands. Upon returning to the village, Nishikaichi and Harada took 4 local residents hostage, including Bene Hakaka, or Ben Kanahele, and his wife Ella. At some point during his captivity, Ben Kanahele attempted to take Nishikaichi's pistol and was shot in the chest and then again in the groin. Despite his wounds, Kanahele picked up Nishikaichi and threw him against a stone wall. Ella then grabbed a rock and smashed Nishikaichi's head in, killing him. For reasons known only to himself, Harada then used the shotgun to take his own life. For his actions, Mr. Kanahele was awarded the Medal of Merit, one of the highest civilian awards given out. He also became one of the few civilians in U.S. military history to be awarded the Purple Heart for the wounds he received. The SBD Dauntless, an American dive bomber, To ensure the accuracy of their attack, dive bombers release their bombs while at a steep downward angle above their target. You'll find two distinctive features on the Dauntless: dive brakes and a swing arm. The dive brakes are the flaps with holes at the trailing edge of the wings, and they prevented the aircraft from diving too fast so the pilot could recover the aircraft after dropping its bomb. The swing arm underneath the engine held a bomb and was designed to swing out to release the bomb away from the aircraft. Without this component, bombs carried underneath the plane's body could hit the propeller after being dropped and damage or destroy the aircraft. Delivered to the U.S. Navy in early 1941, this SBD-2P has an interesting history. Of the 87 SBD-2s built, only 14 received the P designation for photo reconnaissance. Upon delivery to the Navy, this aircraft was tasked with flying off USS Enterprise with Scouting Squadron 6. In spring 1942, the aircraft was loaded onto USS Yorktown and participated in the Battle of the Coral Sea in May 1942. After the Coral Sea, this Dauntless saw service as a training aircraft at the Carrier Qualification Squadron on Lake Michigan until it crashed into the lake in February 1944. There it remained at the bottom of the lake until it was recovered in 2009 and shipped to the Air Zoo Aerospace and Science Museum in Kalamazoo, Michigan for restoration. This well-traveled SBD-2P found its home here at the Pearl Harbor Aviation Museum in November 2021. F4F Wildcat, an American carrier-based fighter aircraft used throughout the war. In January 1992, this aircraft was recovered from the bottom of Lake Michigan. The Navy trained carrier pilots at Glenview Naval Air Station just outside of Chicago. To qualify, pilots had to make 6 aircraft carrier takeoffs and landings, but there were no carriers to spare. So the Navy took 2 old steam paddle wheelers, cut off their tops, and placed flat decking that could be used as a carrier deck to create USS Sable and USS Wolverine. The pilot of this Wildcat had to ditch in the lake and was picked up by a passing boat, but the aircraft sank to the muddy bottom, joining 250 to 300 other aircraft which were also lost in training accidents. It was more cost-efficient at the time to build an entirely new plane than to recover aircraft from the lake. This aircraft took its first post-salvage flight in July 1995, and after some minor repairs, flew for 10 years before relocating to our museum. P-40 Warhawk, an American-built fighter. It is painted to resemble a P-40 from the American Volunteer Group, or AVG, more famously known as the Flying Tigers. On the side of this P-40, just behind the wing, you will see the logo of the Flying Tigers. It is a winged tiger leaping out of a blue V. This design was originally created by artists at Walt Disney Studios. China and Japan had been fighting since 1937, and China was in desperate need of pilots to help defend its territory from Japanese air attacks. In 1940, President Roosevelt signed an executive order allowing Americans to fight as mercenary pilots under the flag of nationalist China. The American Volunteer Group pilots, commanded by Claire Chennault, saw their first action on December 20th, 1941. Despite having no radar systems, the Chinese had an extensive radio network throughout the countryside that could relay enemy aircraft positions to the AVG. The Flying Tigers shot down a staggering 296 Japanese aircraft and lost only 14 of their own over a period of 7 months. The success of the Flying Tigers is attributable to the tactics they used. Flying Tiger pilots utilized the strengths of the P-40 against the weaknesses of the capable Japanese fighters. AVG pilots strictly avoided getting into a turning dogfight with a more maneuverable opponent. Instead, the Flying Tigers would climb above their targets and use their superior speed to dive and fire in a single slashing attack. The hits often proved fatal for the lightly armored Japanese aircraft, and the P-40 would speed away. This successful tactic was dubbed boom and zoom, or shoot and scoot. In order to have sufficient time to launch and climb to higher altitudes to employ these tactics, the intricate Jingbao early warning network was developed. This bright yellow biplane is a Stearman, the primary training aircraft for new American pilots during World War II. It has seats for a trainee and an instructor so that pilots could learn the basic concepts of flight before moving on to more advanced training. The next level of training would be in a T-6 Texan, which you can see in Hangar 79. After mastering the T-6, pilots would transition to the aircraft they would fly in combat. One young ensign named George H.W. Bush learned to fly on this very aircraft.
Okay, this is the flight simulator they're gonna ride on, and they're gonna shoot at the enemies. Whoa, Evan's holding on for dear life.
As we go.
And Grayson. Look, look at the TV. Do you see your brother and your dad? Look, they're sideways. Oh. I know. Oh, they're barrel rolling. Thank you. Did you have fun? How was it?
How was it, good?
Terrifying.
Some cool airplanes. What? Oh, yeah. Hey, let me see. Hey, look, then you can get him a pilot thing. There's some puzzles, aircrafts, backpacks with some airplanes. We'll see, bub. Bomber bag. Babe, here's the Flying Tiger shirts. Hat and shirt combo. Babe, here's some jumpsuits. Too bad we didn't see that, and then they could have worn while we were flying. They got Top Gun stuff. Know that?
Alright, that was the Pearl Harbor Aviation Museum. And now for our first ever Non-Commissioned Rascals giveaway. In order to qualify for the giveaway, all you have to do is like our Facebook page and comment Rascals down below. So the boys are gonna help me show you guys what is in this giveaway. Show them. What is that? Turn it around. This is a World War II clicker. Show them what it does. This is a photo of a P-40 Warhawk. Hold it up. Oh, it's upside down. This is a copy of the original newspaper that was posted the day after the attack on Pearl Harbor. And last but not least, we have a Pearl Harbor Aviation Museum Challenge coin. So make sure you sign up for this giveaway. Thank you for watching, and be sure to tune in next week for more exciting adventures around the islands of Oahu, because we want you to be in the know everywhere we go.
Like, share, and subscribe. Non-Commissioned Rascals.